In the Know, a radio program talking to the newsmakers in Ogle, Lee, DeKalb counties and beyond, keeping you in the know. Here's your host, Charles Van Horn.
Good morning, and joining us this morning on this lovely Sunday, getting ready for the big Independence holiday week, really. State Representative Jeff Keicher from Sycamore. Good morning.
Good morning, Charles. How you doing?
Doing great. Glad to have you with me. Haven't spoken before. Representing the 70th District from Sycamore. First off, what got you interested in politics?
So I've kind of always been involved. I was a political science major at Northern Illinois University, graduated in the 90s, and, my career in insurance took me elsewhere, but always kind of remained involved in Republican politics and advocating for different groups in our in my sphere, in the insurance business and in my community, and kind of was always involved in local grassroots work with the Republican Party. And when I heard my predecessor was thinking about retirement, I stood up, and really the reason I stood up, Charles, the fiscal state, the money dollars that this state spends and how they spend it is broken. And what we continue to do is to chase businesses and job creators out of this state. I mean, just this past week, as I've been out and about in my district, I think probably every third person has told me or in some way insinuated that they're going to consider leaving Illinois, if not already have a plan to leave Illinois. And Illinois doesn't solve its problems by shrinking. Illinois only solves its problems by getting more people here.
As a business owner in the area, you probably are witness to some of that then, right? How has, at least in your opinion, has Illinois policies affected your business that you've been trying to manage along with affairs in Springfield?
Yeah, so what I saw when I first came into business, now I'm in Sycamore in DeKalb County, and what we saw is the city of Sycamore was building somewhere between 500 and 700 new homes each and every year, right? And this year, there are parts of this country that are still on that clip, right? We see it a lot in Florida. We see it down in the Southwest. We see it in Texas. We see it in southern Wisconsin. We see it somewhat in Indiana. And so seeing that slow down, yes, absolutely has impacted not only my business, but businesses of those along the I-39 corridor. And just as a touch point, and again, I go back to, we need to create an environment in Illinois where job creators will actually consider coming to Illinois, because the better jobs that we have, the more jobs that we have, the more that will attract people to come back to this state, and that will help immensely. So I asked an organization called COGFO, which stands for Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. They are a nonpartisan branch of the legislature. And they're kind of our tech experts, our research people that can go out and get facts and figures and present them in a very applicable way to all parties. It doesn't take a partisan glance to anything. And so what I asked them was, hey, between the census years of 2010 and 2020, what would Illinois' population have grown to if we grew at the average rate of only the 6 states that touch us? That's it. I don't want the whole country. I don't want these, population explosions in North Carolina and Texas and Florida influencing this. Just in the Midwest, how would Illinois have grown? And the calculation comes back at, if Illinois had grown in those 10 years, again, using census data so that it's certified per person count, we would have grown 722,000 additional people in that time frame. That solves a lot of problems, because of those 722,000, Charles, approximately 451,000 of those people would be working in various jobs, generating a household income in total of $26,609,000,000. And just imagine that amount of money getting pushed back into our communities from additional residents, additional businesses, sports teams, going out, having restaurants. It's exponential change. And instead, what we see, led by my peers on the other side of the aisle, is we see aggressive mandates and anti-business measures that continue to push people out of state. And so at the end of 2024, we had in Illinois our unemployment rate at 4.9%. The national rate was 4.1%. So again, I went to my friends at COGFA and I said, listen, what does that actually represent in bodies? And what they came back with was, it was a little shocking. That number, that difference represents 55,400 underemployed Illinoisans. Meaning, if we were average, 55,000 more Illinoisans would be working. And why aren't we average? Because of the policies that are put into place in this state, where we see employers holding off on hiring, holding off on expanding, and frankly, in some situations, choosing other states to locate in.
Now, you say that Springfield and obviously the Democrats, you're pointing the fingers at them, saying that it's the policies that are causing these. What are like one or two of the policies that you feel are the ones that are the biggest lever, as it were, launching these businesses on a catapult out of the state? Well, what are the one or two big policies you think are leading the charge on that?
Yeah, so I'll give you three. So the first one is lawsuits. Illinois is so incredibly friendly to trial lawyers that businesses won't put their feet in the water, if you will, for fear that they're going to be held to a trial on something that they didn't even intend to be trialed on. And I'll give you an example of that specifically with what's called BIPA, or our Biometric Information Privacy Act. And since 2015, and again, we put a solution in place just last year for this, so this is something that has been partially resolved, not completely resolved. We put a measure in place, but basically BIPA was passed in 2008, and what that said is we were prohibited from using any type of biometric information of any person without certain methods of consent. Now, it doesn't sound like a big deal. The biggest example of that, to keep it brief for you, would be thumbprint time clocks, produced by an Illinois company, Motorola for the most part. Those thumbprint time clocks were installed in almost all of the White Castle locations. And so you'd have somebody come in, they'd thumb in at the beginning of the day, they'd thumb out for a smoke break, thumb back in, thumb out for lunch, thumb back in. And so on average, you'd have 4 to 6 different thumbs in and out of the time clock during the day. And the suggested total verdict amount as given by the Illinois Supreme Court to the lower court, trying to figure out how this BIPA statute works, was that White Castle could be held liable for $17 billion in violations for BIPA. Now, that's a lot of sliders, and it's just obscene. None of the employers were aware. There's no defense to BIPA whatsoever, and creative plaintiffs' attorneys were suing multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars in verdicts to get that. Many of your listeners were probably a part of the Facebook settlement that occurred 2017, 2018. Everybody who Facebook had done facial scans to try to match pictures that they had uploaded to their Facebook page to other images, Facebook was found to be at fault in Illinois only. They're still doing this in other states, and that's a perspective that a lot of people lose sight on. Everybody got about a $400 and some odd check from Facebook for that. So that's an example of our lawsuit environment and how heavy the verdicts are that discourage businesses from considering Illinois. The other one that came up more recently was the aggressive ramp up of the minimum wage in Illinois to $15, which will hit this next year. Now, I am in no way suggesting, Charles, that $15 is a livable wage or that it's the right number. It's very arbitrary. Why 15 and not 25? Why not 35? It's because somebody picked 15 as a good number, right? It has no basis in reality. The other challenge with that is $15 in Effingham, Illinois, or Rockford, Illinois, is very different than $15 in downtown Chicago, right? There was no accountability for regional variance. And as a result of this, what you're seeing in most of our McDonald's, most of our grocery stores, is you're seeing automated processes, order at kiosks, pay at the checkout aisle on your own by scanning your own item, instead of having people working. And I'm not saying people should be working there for their livelihood, though they can, but we're denying high school students the opportunity to have a good summer job now. We're not giving them that first opportunity. And if you talk to any parents who have kids in high school right now, they're struggling to find a place for their kid to work over the summer because those jobs that those high school students would normally take are priced out of the marketplace for employers to do it.
And to be a point of reference, the minimum wage in Chicago currently isn't 15. It's actually 16 and some change, I think, right now. And I don't know if that's going to be going up, too, as with the rest of the state. I don't know if they're tied together there.
Yeah, and if we get into the nitty-gritty, yes, Chicago specifically has their own schedule for $15, $16. I think they're going up to $18 or $20 minimum wage, separate from the state. The point I was making was the regional variance in what that means across the state.
Yeah, and again, with a lot of the unemployment being so a little higher than the national average, there is still plenty of jobs to fill. And again, to your point, the question is whether or not those are accessible to entry-level positions or to younger folks in the state. Would any form, I know you said, you don't think 15 could be or is or isn't. Obviously, rolling that back is an impossibility. You certainly can't claw that back. That would make everybody as unpopular as they ever possibly could be. But is there thoughts to slowing anything in the future down, tie it to inflation, or maybe put rules in place so that, you as the minority party don't have much say in the matter, of course, to prevent the majority party from waving a magic wand and making it $100 an hour. But do you think there could be a compromise made across the aisle on maybe a wage point so that we don't have another scale up like this that could be detrimental to businesses?
Yeah, when I look at the environment in which that minimum wage increase was done in 2019, I don't think with the current administration there's much for addressing that in the near future. It would take a different administration. It would take a different approach.
And real quick, to touch on this in the final minutes here, you have been a big proponent on some legislation out of Springfield when it comes to vehicles, insurance, and especially older drivers. In about 30 seconds, tell me why you fought so hard to change some of those rules.
Yeah, a constituent spoke up, and I want to encourage all of your listeners, Charles, to speak up if they have a problem that they see needs to be changed. So I had a bunch of senior drivers, and I wasn't aware of the level of testing that they had to go through. But at the time, once you crossed over 72 years old, you were subject to every 2 years and then every 1 year as you got older, going into a DMV and sitting behind a wheel for a driving test each and every year or every 2 years. And that's just ageist. There is no other state in this country that subjects people to, and the only trigger in order to take that test was you had a birthday. My proposal last year that the Secretary of State put a brick on, and we wound up moving to a different style that passed and is awaiting governor's signature this year. But my approach was, let's use things that actually count in driving. Let's test the people that have tickets, accidents, a physical condition, or a mental condition that could affect the operation of a vehicle, and let's test them at any age. The 75-year-old person out driving isn't the one texting and speeding to the stoplight. They're not the ones running into it. Do older people have accidents? yes, but not to the same extent that the younger drivers do. We should be taking, and by the way, the senior drivers who are having those accidents currently have their license. It's not working. Those people are licensed drivers on the road. So let's take the population that has problems at any age and submit them to additional screening. It'd make our roads safer. It'd make the process easier. And it would, instead of having an ageist policy for when you have a birthday, it would put common sense reforms in place at the Secretary of State's office.
Can I add one more metric to that?
Yeah.
Amount of inches above the steering wheel their heads go. Just to... Because sometimes it looks like they're hanging on monkey bars. Just saying.
Or how about how close you're sitting to the steering wheel? I've seen some people that are right up on it, and I don't know how their arms can turn on a corner.
Or just hang out in an oil change place and pull in anybody who has a 15-year-old Buick. Representative Jeff Keicher, thank you so much for joining us this morning on In the Know. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Charles. Have a good week.
Thank you for listening to this week's In the Know. The program returns next week at this time with another great conversation with someone from your community.